Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all my lovely, beautiful, wonderful listeners. Welcome to our first edition of the Oyster, which is the use of symbols artifacts to creating a galactic society through your idea of putting in your pinch of salt into the salt or sand into the oyster and watching it grow into the very pearl that it was always meant to be. But the fact of the matter is, you're already a pearl. Now, with the oyster, it allows you to use symbols and artifacts to creating that wonderful beautifulness that is always meant to be. Now, the very, very wonderful way that we can do this is through a combination of what I have personally would like to offer to you is an idea. And of course, ideas revolutionize the way that we can view our society, blah, 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 create prosperity and peace, blah, 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 and ultimately a next new wonderful renaissance. Ultimately, the pearl in the oyster. Now, there are many different types of arguments. And arguments have fallacies or let me rephrase that. Arguments that are used usually have a certain type of structure behind it. Now, these structures are informal, formal, or, they're known to be red herrings. Now, what are these? These are this type of arguments that are usually used. Logical fallacies are, I'm just going to list them off. No true Scotsman, equivocation, slippery slope, not a cause for a cause, false dilemma, composition and division, circular reasoning, hasty generalization, appeal to ignorance, argument from consequences, guilt by association, straw man, appeal to irrelevant authority, appeal to hypocrisy, ad hominem, genetic fallacy, appeal to fear, appeal to the bandwagon, affirming the consequent. These are all examples of logical fallacies. However, what I've done creatively is I attached a type of symbol a 3D symbol to go along with these type of logical fallacies. Now, what does that mean? How can you possibly attach a symbol to these fallacies? I used origami. These origami actually have a type of meaning that goes to the actual definition of what these arguments are. So I'm going to go through them, and you will hopefully gain all the wisdom that is to provide. Argument from consequences. The definition is speaking for or against the truth of a statement by appealing to the consequence it would have if true or if false. Tato purse. The origami figure called the Tato purse. If you can look up both the Tato purse and see that it is, a type of octagonic shape with 4 triangles. That is the symbol for argument again from consequences. Straw man. Straw man is to put up a straw man is to intentionally caricature a person's argument with the aim of attacking the caricature rather than the actual argument. The origami picture 3D picture diagram for that is the crane's egg, which looks like a crane's egg. I have no other way to better describe that. Appeal to irrelevant authority is an appeal to authority is to appeal to one's sense of modesty, which is to say an appeal to the feeling that others are more knowledgeable, which may often, but of course not always, be true. The origami diagram that I chose to go with that is the butterfly. Now, equivocation is the next one, which exploits the ambiguity of language by changing the meaning of a word during the course of an argument and using the different meaning to support an ill-founded conclusion. The diagram I used with this is the dim sum bunny, which looks a little bit like a bunny rabbit made out of paper, or whatever you choose to make the origami out of. I will not limit your imagination or your creativity. I'll try not to. Correct that. False dilemma is an argument that presents a limited set of 2 possible categories and assumes that everything in the scope of the discussion must be an element of that set. $5 star is the origami that goes along with that. Not a cause for a cause assumes that a cause for an event where there is no evidence that one exists. Swak envelope, SWAK envelope is the origami figure that I use for that. Appeal to fear. This fallacy plays on the fear of an audience by imagining a scary future that would be of their making if some proposition were accepted. Origami figure that I use for this, 2 lips. It looks like 2 lips with a type of V figure. You can look it up and see it for yourself. Hasty generalization. The fallacy is committed when one forms a conclusion from a sample that is either too small or too special to be representative. This is represented by the origami kanji, the dog. Appeal to ignorance. This is the kind of argument that assumes a proposition to be true simply because there is no evidence proving that it is false. Hence, the evidence is to be taken to be the evidence of absence. I use the Mantajet as this set of origami. No true Scotsman. This argument comes up after someone has made a general claim about a group of things and then been presented with evidence challenging that claim. Chuck Finn is the origami that I use for that. Genetic fallacy is committed when an argument is either devalued or defended solely because of its origins. Baby dinosaur is that origin of that origami for the definition of genetic fallacy. Guilt by association. Guilt by association is used to discrete an argument for proposing an idea that is shared by someone socially demonized, individually or group. Essentially, what these examples try to argue is that some group of people is absolutely and categorically bad. Petaluna moonflower. Petalunia moonflower is the origami example with that. It is a red herring. Affirming the consequent. An example, the people who go to college are successful. John's successful, hence he must have gone to college. The origami that I use for that is dazzle. Appeal to hypocrisy. The Latin name meaning you too. Hypocrisy, I would assume, is self-explanatory enough, and I use the origami, the cardinal. Slippery slope. Attempts to discredit a proposition by arguing that its acceptance will undoubtedly lead to a sequence of events, one or more which are undesirable. The example that I use for that origami example is the dollar yacht. Appeal to the bandwagon uses the fact that many people, or even a majority, believe in something as evidence that it must be true. The origami that I used is the pig. Ad hominem attacks a person rather than the argument he or she is making, with the intention of diverting the discussion and discrediting their argument. Scallop. I made a scallop for ad hominem. Circular reasoning, known as begging the question, where one implicitly or explicitly assumes the conclusion in one or more of the premises. Shuttlecock is the origami for the circular reasoning. Composition and division. One commits the fallacy of composition by inferring that because the parts of the whole have a particular attribute, the whole must have that attribute also. That origami figure is the seahorse. Now, these, of course, all have their particular plays very, very creatively in many parts of education, society, politics, to planetary scale events, to history, to our future, and the way we view it, and the way we respond to it. Now, this is an indispensable tool which proves that we can use critical thinking as an indispensable tool. So basically, what I'm trying to say is critical thinking proves an indispensable tool. And reminded awareness the reminded awareness of the dangers of flimsy arguments and how commonplace they are in our everyday lives. Now, this is one of the things that I do, but this is also something, an indispensable tool, which is critical thinking, that I think every single human being should have and be able to use in order to accelerate not only themselves as an individual in their independence for what, for example, the U.S. Constitution defends, but it should be used to allow and promote prosperity and freedom and liberty in this coming age, which is our Renaissance, and us ultimately opening up the oyster inside of us with the grain of sand that has been placed there, gently allowing us to grow. Now, ultimately, to elaborate a little bit more, just because I have a lot of extra time, there's no such thing as time. Time is relative. But because there are 4 minutes left in this segment, I would like to add that there is the ability to, of course, use this to create a galactic society. Now, that is a wonderful idea that ultimately creates nations, diversity, culture, science, and a type of promotion that would compare to the Dark Ages being the prerequisite to the Renaissance. And what I mean by prerequisite is, there were Dark Ages before the Renaissance began. So now that we're now living in the Renaissance, we can now look back, for example, at the Dark Ages and see how we can use the tools that are indispensable there as critical thinking abilities, accesses, and configurations to be able to allow us to transfigure, transform, and transmute whatever we see in now a more creative light. Now, that allows us to give the wisdom to have the coherency to allow accelerated transcendence with our fellow elder brothers of our Agarthian heritage, of our Agarthian culture, Agarthian science, Telosian homeland, and ultimately our space family. Now, this is a wonderful, 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 exciting time, and I use the word wonderful a lot on purpose to be redundant, to say how important this decade is to all of us. It is 2017, January 10th. I'm your host, Christopher Bowen, and I hope that you are allowed to be enlightened, that you have been aware of what has been going on, and that you now have the fullest opportunity to have these tools be used for the benefit of all. Now, of course, will this be thought of and, perhaps misled in another way? Of course. I mean, that's been going on for ages. But understand that together we can make anything happen. Anything that's positive, as in terms of we can make the best of this Renaissance, the best for all that is, the best for everyone. This knowledge, the awareness, actually, of just widespread fighting back against global tyranny has been going on for a very long time, and now we are fully awakening to it. So now that we have awakened, we can now invite the acceleration of the tools that we can use every day. Once again, we have the ability to open up ourselves and present the pearl that is within our oyster. This is the oyster, and I am your host, Christopher Bowen, and I hope that you continue to support and continue to send your prayers and your love, and hope that I continue to do the best that I can for the support of all that we are. Have a good night.